The biggest challenge now going forward is, we lived in a world where we knew the same 500 people came into the office most days, and then maybe we had another 200 that came in some days. Now we're going to have maybe 300 people coming in on average, but it's all different people. So it's how do you flip the office around so you make it available for regardless of who comes in? That's the challenge.
Excellent. Good morning, wherever you are. Good evening, good afternoon. Cindy, Tom, great to have you here on this podcast titled Waterloo Grit. And super excited to be chatting with you and hearing about your plans as you open your facilities, but how innovation plays a key role in what you do and whatever you do catalyzes innovation. So can't wait to get started. Welcome to the podcast. Let's kick it off by having you folks introduce yourselves.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead,
Jay.
Cindy.
Thank you. I'll kick things off. My name is Cindy Fagen. I'm the Managing Director of SAP Labs Canada. Nice to be here with all of you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tom Giannakakis. I'm based in Toronto. I'm the head of global real estate and facilities for Canada, and very excited to be here as well.
Excellent. Thank you. So the first thing I want to ask both of you, for the sake of our audience, and a lot of the folks who are going to listen in are going to be entrepreneurs, and quite a few folks from the tech background, right? So one key question that I wanted to ask you was, how is a giant organization like SAP Labs different from a tech company where R&D is perceived to be within the organization? And do you foresee Labs as an entity that has the ability to innovate outside of engineering at, let's say, SAP? So walk us through what Labs does versus what the organization does, Cindy.
Great question, Jay. So just to put things into context, we have just over 20 labs at SAP globally. Canada is the fourth largest. Canada being a little more complex, that within Canada we have 3 of our 6 offices in Canada that are considered to be labs locations. So by definition, that would mean that over 80% of the people in the building, therefore, are focused on research and development. And so what makes it interesting as well is that we're developing for a global customer. We're working in a distributed network. So that's something that our teams are used to doing. In that, I'll give you an example. A team in Waterloo will be working on a very important topic that they'll be doing in concert with perhaps a lab in Israel or China or Ireland, as an example. So they work already in a very distributed network on a particular topic. And in any one location, we'll have multiple topics being built out for this global portfolio. To answer your question, though, while we do have the lion's share that are focused on specific innovation topics for the portfolio, we really work very hard to make sure that all of the employees understand that they're part of the innovation solution. So we're all innovating. You'll hear some examples in how we're innovating in the facilities team in some of the new spaces that we're building out. And so really trying to connect employees to the understanding that everyone's bringing innovation to their day-to-day.
Got it. Thank you. Switching over to you, Tom, let's go to the years before the pandemic, right? And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Post-pandemic, we'll save some ample time for that, because that's really where the future is. But how, in your head, did real estate play a role in catalyzing innovation that Cindy spoke about, specifically from where you see things, right? Because it's fragmented. You operate across continents. So how much of a role did real estate play in the past?
I think in the past, it's been an interesting journey. I think COVID is almost what gave us the opportunity to change. Previously, it was mostly, rows of seats and desks, meeting rooms. We had started to break into the collaboration space area a little bit in the last few years. But especially in the lab organization, for the most part, they just wanted seats. Most employees came in every day and wanted a dedicated desk they could sit at and work. in the last couple of years, and when I say the last couple of years, I don't count the last 18 months. So I kind of start with 2019 and go backwards. A big thing was in the lab area, they wanted open space. I mean, they scrum a lot, they break out a lot for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. So we had started to get into that arena a little more. But COVID completely changed the game as to how we design our space now, because the workstations almost become something that, yeah, you put some in, but that's not why employees are coming in. What they've learned now is, hey, I can do that work at home. When I'm coming in more to be engaged, to collaborate, to meet with my team or with my colleagues. So that's been the biggest shift in the last few months, and probably 18 months.
I 100% agree with Tom. I think that, we've all said it, the pandemic has accelerated so many things. But, in the tech industry, and so many of your listeners will say that we've already been working for the most part in a very flex way. I think the big difference is that we've really proven during this last 19 months of the pandemic that being tethered to a desk as a mode, the show up culture is not something that we're going to take forward with us. And so we've had to really think and listen and afford a lot of trust that we continue to do with all of our employees even after the pandemic. And so that's really impacting the way we're going to build out space. The best example of that right now is our new office that we've just revealed last week here in Montreal, which is one of the front runner locations for SAP globally and a future of workspace. But, we were already bringing innovation to our spaces well before the pandemic. And I think about our Waterloo office that we built out a brand new facility, and we only had 3 months to be in that facility before we sent everybody home for the pandemic. That's a best-in-class space. It was then, and it still is today. But what we're going to be really paying attention to going forward is how are the employees going to use space? What are their needs going to be going forward? And I do agree with Tom. I think you'll see a much higher need for collaboration spaces, because this idea of doing concentrated work, we've proven we can do that at home.
Right. And Cindy, you mentioned you're actually in the new space, right? You're back in the office now.
Yes, I am.
Yep.
And in fact, purposely chosen for you today. I'm not in an office. I don't have an office in this space as managing director. We have a really unique space here. And as you see, I'm sitting in a bit of a beautiful furniture selection. It's a seat with a little bit of a desk and storage. And I've just popped in here and done a little bit of work. This morning, you would have found me in the working cafe, close to coffee, but also very visible so I could chat with employees, as I haven't seen so many of them in a long time. But this new office provides a lot of variety of seating. So that, again, the classic desk as we know it, yes, there's lots of those. They're 38-inch monitors and sit-stand desks, best in class for sure, but there's lots of variety of space. Because, again, I have to think about the activities I'm going to do today and then plan the kinds of space that I'm going to need.
Got it. And I'm guessing not too many headaches that you dealt with, Tom, to reconfigure the space in the last 18 months while the rest of us were looking through a laptop.
Well, Montreal was really easy, right? Because it's a build out. So you actually bring up something that's going to be a challenge starting probably in 2022 is making that pivot to existing space. But Montreal was, I hate to use the word easy, but it was easy in the sense like you're starting with an open, empty shell. And we based it on, we call it our 4 C's, which is concentration, which is your traditional workstation. But even that, we were like, yeah, they're all going to be sit-stand desks. They're all going to have 38-inch monitors. Then we have community space, which is our cafe. We have other areas where they're mostly right off the elevator, where they're big open areas with comfortable couches where people can gather. We have our collaboration space, which is more our meeting rooms. So we're trying to have a little bit of everything. And even Cindy mentioned the office. I know this never comes up anywhere else, right? Well, what about my office? The biggest buy-in was having our MDs say, I'm all in.
Right.
I don't need an office. Our CFO, who's based in Montreal, yeah, you know what? I don't need an office. But then for people that do need an office, let's say Cindy comes in one day and she has to have confidential meetings. We put a ton of different types of space in, whether she needs to get together and have a confidential meeting with 5 people or with 2 people, we've provided all those types of spaces there. The challenge will be as we move forward, where we have offices where we just mainly have workstation, is reconfiguring them, is putting in more collaboration space. The other unique thing that we did in Montreal, I believe, first office in all of SAP globally, we didn't assign workstations. We assigned them by teams. So we said, hey, this area is for this team. But then we developed an in-house app where you actually book your seat before you come in.
Oh, interesting. Nice.
Yeah, you book your seat,
Yeah.
book your day, which is what I did today.
Yeah.
I thought about the meetings that I have, and then I booked space based on what I needed to get done today. And I think that's the big shift. Look, the office is going to be another destination. It's not the only destination, right? So I have to think very carefully about the work I have to get done in a day and where I'm choosing to do that. And if it's at the office, that I have that kind of variety so that it meets the needs that I need to perform for the day.
Got it.
The other, like, because what Cindy said reminded me of something, is you do plan your day, but your day isn't 9 to 5 anymore. So it could be that, let's say, you know what, we all love commuting to work, right? So what you do now is, like, you say, you know what, I'll have an 8 o'clock call, maybe I have a 9 o'clock call, and then, hey, I'm going to avoid traffic, and then I'm going to go to the office at 10.
Right.
Maybe I'll stay till 3, maybe I'll stay till 2, and then I'll leave. So you can structure your day. It's not only just your hours and where you're working, is how you're working and when you're working, so that you make the office fit your schedule.
That's fascinating, right? And prior to the podcast, when we sort of huddled and spoke, one of the things that I fell in love with was a line that both of you spoke about very eloquently. And I think that's what you're alluding to, Tom, which is a shift in corporate / institutional mindset, where we reconcile with the idea that there is no finish line to this, right? Walk me through what that's like, because that's such an interesting paradigm.
There's no finish line in the sense from the way the
from
go ahead. What were you going to say?
From a pandemic disappearing on December 31st, 2020, or in this case 2021, and therefore
it's not right. Yeah.
And therefore you gear up corporate culture centered around real estate based on this imaginary finish line. And the minute you take that away, things become simpler. Right?
Yeah. The COVID is, look, it's a dreadful thing that's happened to the world, but it's also become for us, I hate to use the word an opportunity, but it has been an opportunity to just completely, because before it happened, if say Cindy and the leadership team said, you know what, we're going to let people work from home. That would have been like, what? Are you crazy? How do we know people are working? People are not going to work. And then we had no choice. And then we found, you know what? It works. People are productive. But then we also found, as time went by, I mean, if we've done a ton of polls internally. So if you did a poll last April, May, June, like 30%, 40% were like, yeah, I'm never coming back to the office ever. I'm not leaving my house. And then as time went by, people were like, yeah, I really need to come back to the office. Right. Maybe I don't need to come back 5 days a week, but like I miss this. I miss seeing people. I miss just getting out. I miss the most incredible article I read was people miss the transition. Like you're sitting at home, you're in like I'm lucky enough to have a home office, which is a converted bedroom, but my day say ends at 5 o'clock. My transition is I go down the stairs and I got my kids waiting to ask me what's for dinner. My head hasn't left work yet. Whereas previously, you know what, you get on the train or whether you drive, maybe you listen to a podcast like this one, or maybe you listen to a sports podcast, you read, your brain had a chance to turn off. And that's been like, people have been able to adjust to that slowly. But yeah, to me, COVID just kind of became the opportunity to remap what we offer. The biggest challenge now going forward is, we lived in a world where we knew the same like 500 people came into the office most days, and then maybe we had another 200 that came in some days. Now we're going to have maybe 300 people coming in on average, but it's all different
Mm-hmm.
people. So is like, how do you flip the office around so you make it available for regardless of who comes in?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the challenge.
Right. And from your lens, Cindy, how does that parlay into the challenge of culture, right? I would imagine one of the challenges that you have as a senior exec is to continuously foster this culture of innovation. So, in a shifting paradigm where space has now changed and is probably going to continuously change, how do you maintain that rudder of fostering
Mm.
innovation?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it ties back to what you were talking about earlier, in that we've got to create this understanding that there's no finish line, right?
Mm.
And this is, I hate to use the word new normal, right? But that our pivots really have been pirouettes over the last 9 months. So I'd love to say that, but how do you maintain that culture? And it's particularly important for us as we think about new hires and our interns. We have over 380 interns that joined SAP Canada this past year. So how do you tie them to creating this new culture? So it's happening within the teams, but our office, of course, is responsible for making sure that they feel connected to something much larger. And so we've had to do lots of things, very creatively. Even in the way we launched our new office last week, having a virtual and an in-person option, right? I think you've seen us do a lot of things that I like to say are very high touch. Last week in opening our office, VIP tours for every employee, right? Understanding that we had to do things in small groups so that we could keep everyone safe during a pandemic, but also recognizing that the employees really need this sense of connection, feeling part of something much larger. And so it's meant that we've had to do things in a much more empathetic, high touch, high connection, creating those instances where people can have those connections, whether that's in a virtual setting or in person.
Got it.
I'll give you a real example of that. That is something that we did before the pandemic, where we would recognize something very simple, recognizing work anniversaries and thanking employees for their years of service. We used to do that in office with cake and an opportunity to bring people up on stage and to celebrate them with anecdotes and pictures of their teams. And we do that now virtually. I'll tell you that it's one of our favorite events. Why? Because you see people come out from all over. It's more accessible now, right? You don't actually have to physically be in the office. We can dial people in from other geographies. And so that event has become much more personal, much more high touch, and much more valuable. And so really having that lens on connecting people, I think, has been a big learning for us. Similarly, tying them to rituals, right? We used to do holiday events. We used to bring all of the employees and their families to playgrounds, play parks all across Canada. Instead, we've brought those events to people's homes. So including families has been really critical for us, because we're all living this, and most of us are working from home and sharing space with significant others. And so including them in our events has been something that we've really tried to do as well, because we really all have been in this together.
Got it. Yeah, I think the only thing missing is the ability to ship a 3D printer that prints cake while you're remote.
But see, this is the beautiful thing during this pandemic.
Yeah,
We've
we have a
proven
solution for this. Yeah.
we've proven
Go ahead.
that we don't actually need the cake. That's the big thing, right? Is people really have much more of an appetite. Sorry for the pun, but for the connection more than the cake.
Right, right. Yeah, good one. And the new norm, as we are all calling it, you think it's transient, or it's here to stay with its own flavor of evolution? And by that I mean, question to you, Cindy, is culture, and to you, Tom, the physics of real estate.
So my answer is, I think that there's no finish line, also in the sense that we're going to be in continuous learning. We've been constantly in this change management of this project for the launch of the Montreal Future of Work offices, starting that change management way, way earlier than we typically would, and also creating this mindset that it's not over once we launch the office. The real work now starts. And so impressing upon the employees that we're all in this together, that we're going to be in high listening mode, that we're going to be learning what works and what you need more of and what you need less of, that we don't know. We don't have all the answers. We've done a lot to be in high listening mode, a lot of design thinking sessions to understand, the needs of what the employees think they need, but also learning and living that. It's going to take some time before we have any real data. All of us are in this big social experiment as we, come back to the office. I myself this morning transitioning, coming in, right? I watched myself becoming more familiar with how I'm going to plan my day. It's new for all of us, and I think we're going to have a lot of empathy and continue to be in high listening mode and be really managing this change. And so I don't see a finish line for that either. We're going to learn a lot. And the employees are going to need to see us be able to take action on those, learnings. And again, we also have to be gentle on ourselves. I like to say that sure, we're all doing surveys. We're all answering in a moment in time. If we all remember,
Yeah.
we all did surveys in 9/11 and said we would never travel again,
Right.
right? What did we really know? And so I think it's the same right now, is we're answering in a moment of time. And so Tom and I are very much aligned on this, and that, 6 months from now, we're going to have a lot more data to be able to make decisions going forward. That's going to affect a lot of things.
Yeah, and I like to think it's not the new norm. I mean, we all went through different stages the last 18 months where you're like, oh, crap, this better not be the new norm. But you've already seen it, right? It's people are more comfortable every day with what they're doing. We got sporting events now at capacity, both in Toronto, Montreal, the two obvious cities with NHL teams. That didn't even seem imaginable 6 months ago. But we don't know. It's almost like I echo Cindy in that there is no finish line, but I also think it's not the new norm either. I think, this is here to stay. We'll have to live with it probably, like we live with other things that have come our way. But slowly, I think things will get back to, again, what's normal. I've almost forgotten what normal is, but I don't think it's here to stay.
Got it. Yeah, terrific points, both. And on that topic, I wanted to put you both on the spot a bit, right? And ask you, I mean, if you look at polls across the world, right, specifically with institution building and with larger corporates that are in the tech realm, one of the things, I'm challenged with this, although the AC, the Accelerator Center, is much smaller. One of the challenges is, what does it take for us to listen to the stakeholders? Large part of that is the customer base, and more importantly, in this case, the employee base, right? So do you organically listen to the voice of the employees so that you're in tune to, like you both suggested, the change that we need to bring to make their lives comfortable, and therefore the organization remains the way it is? Or is it organic enough that you pick up as you go? Or does it need to be programmatic, I suppose, is the question.
Yeah. So I think it has to be a combination of both. So we've definitely had very programmatic answers to this. In a typical project, we would create ambassador groups where we'd have employees from each group that would be bringing information to us, but also having the role of some of that change management and cascading back. We have to be conscious of the fact, we were just talking about this morning, Tom and I, that information is going to come to us in multiple ways because we're all using multiple channels. And so go where the internal customer is super important. So some of it's very organized, and some of it is also very organic, as you say. The key for us, of course, is being able to centralize all this in one place where we can take a look at it, look at the trends, see what's actionable, and be able to come back with answers. And sometimes we don't know is an answer, and that's good enough for now. So it really necessitates, I think, in the change management that we've tried to really work hard on is, having everybody bought into this idea of we're going to figure this out together. And so be gentle with us on the feedback, but bring it. Right. And we might not have all the answers, but we're working with you towards what those answers might be. Similarly, we've also gone the extra effort. So some would say this is a lot of extra work, but I can tell you that it's paid off in spades today and where we're at with our Montreal project. Again, I'm using that as our most recent example. And that is that Tom did a lot of work to be in listening mode with all of our leaders, to really sit with them to understand what they think they were going to need. And now the next piece of that is, okay, what do you think, how is it working, and what do you need going forward? Tom, maybe you might want to build on that.
Yeah, I mean, the other critical thing that we did, I mean, it was not COVID related at the time, but what we've done in our last couple of projects is we also have what we call visioning sessions. So we bring in, our designer, we bring in our change management vendor, and then we bring leadership groups in, and we break them out too, right? Because what the leaders may want or think they want, and what the employees want or think they want, sometimes clash. So it's really, really important to listen to all of them, and then we make recommendations. We don't force, it's not like, well, okay, you asked for 10 rooms with 30 people capacity and we're going to give you one because our data shows you never use a room that big. But sometimes we have to share data like that. The most obvious one is even leadership will think, well, we need more space. And we'd be like, why? Well, look, the facility is full. And then, we'll provide data that shows, yeah, but, we're running at 50% or 60%. So it's really important to share the data with them as well, and then build a space that actually gives them everything they want without just making it bigger. It's almost right sizing the space for their needs.
Interesting.
You just said build the space based on what they want. And I think one of the things I'm the most proud of at SAP Canada is also the way we bring things to the space that they never knew they needed, right?
Yeah.
And that's, again, because we've been in high listening mode, because we're a company who, innovation is part of our DNA. And so this constant curiosity, ask more questions, put the customer at the center, be empathetic, dig deeper, has brought us to some pretty impressive things that, again, keep us best in class. And I mean, the best example, Tom, you should talk about, your learnings around the multi-faith prayer room and what that turned into here in Montreal.
Yep, I'll get to that one in a second. But the other thing I can tell where Cindy's sitting because I was there last week. We're getting away from building walls. What we're trying to do is look at furniture solutions that almost like furniture in a box, where you put it up and then you're like 6 months later, hey, this is not working. Nobody uses this. So you get rid of it, or you reconfigure it. So that's one thing we've started to do. The other thing we've started to do is, diversity and inclusion has become more and more important everywhere, right? But in particular in Canada, we're a multicultural country, and our big cities are. So in Montreal, again, as part of our visioning session, things they asked for were like a wellness room, multi-faith room, a first aid room, a nursing room. And then what we used to do, those were always an afterthought.
Right.
So it was like, okay, what meeting room is somebody not using? Okay, go use that room to meditate or pray. It was really, it's almost like insulting to the person that has to pray. We have found people, actually not from our company, where you're going down a stairwell in a multi-tenant building and you find people praying in the stairwells. So what we did, we try to build each one of those separately. So we have a wellness room, a dedicated wellness room. We have a dedicated first aid room, and we have a dedicated multi-faith room. The multi-faith room was really challenging because internally, no one had one dedicated like that. So we reached out to our Middle Eastern colleagues at meetings with people in Qatar, and it's like, hey, how do you guys do it? Because what we had heard in Montreal was the female population doesn't feel included, and they're afraid to use the multi-prayer room because the men dominate it. So then what we did, we split the room in half. We put a curtain in, we put separate entrances in. We needed a sink for ablution. So then our designer came up with a brilliant idea, because the bathroom was on the other side of the multi-faith room, where they built in a little foot wash stand. It's away from the multi-faith room, because you don't want to be in the room praying and somebody's washing their feet next to you. So we took that out, but put it right next door. So it was really, really critical to talk to different people and find the ones that are doing something that works for them versus somebody who says, yeah, you don't want to do that because it doesn't
Right.
work.
Oh, that's fascinating. And sticking with the fond topic of tearing down walls, which has been a topic for the last 5 years at least. I was going to ask you both in terms of what does inclusivity mean through the lens of space, which I think you've given us a terrific example, Tom, which I don't think I've ever heard a shift in paradigm like the way you articulated what you folks did. But here's a question to you, Cindy, and that is inclusivity through the lens of creativity, right? What does it take to foster creativity by bringing more inclusivity and more diversity? And I'm guessing if anything,
Well, I'm in.
the pandemic has accelerated some of the instruments that you want to put in place.
Well, there's two pieces of that. I mean, the first is that innovation, it's a strategic innovation, a strategic advantage to have diversity at the table, right? It drives our innovation. We're building for a global customer, so it's incumbent on us that we have diversity at the table in the lab, building solutions for a global customer. So that's always been part of our DNA. But I think, as Tom has just said, you see that in everything we do and say, and you see it now in how it's touching space and being inclusive. I think the big thing we're going to see now going forward during this pandemic is now how are we going to be inclusive in creating these environments that are going to be inclusive for hybrid, meaning that I'm going to have a team who 50% might decide to come into the office today and the other may choose to work from home. And as SAP has a pledge to flex, that's something that is a construct for all of us at SAP globally. So then the question is, how do we make sure that we're supporting leaders to be able to be inclusive so that this idea of, look, I come from a generation that when I worked from home, there was an eyebrow raised and think, is she really working from home? Right?
It was like, yeah, working from home. My friends used to make fun of me. Are you working from home today?
Right.
They just assumed I was golfing.
That's right. So there's a lot of stigma attached with working from home. And I really personally think if there's anything good that comes out of this pandemic, I hope that's an artifact of COVID, right? And so, but the big piece is how to support the teams to be able to be inclusive. And I think one of the best examples that came to me that seems so basic, but really made me take pause is in the listening sessions as we were designing out. Tom spoke about the meditation yoga room, and many employees asked if they could have AV in that room. And we thought, why would they want that? Well, there were enough leaders there that were already foreshadowing that they were going to need to perhaps run a session for their teams where some would be at home and some would be actually in the meditation room, and that they need to create an environment that would be inclusive. So there wouldn't be stigma if I chose not to come in, and that I'd feel part of the team. And you need IT support, you need to have the best space in AV, but you also need to have this mindset with the leaders that they have to be able to be inclusive in that way. So that's a different lens on inclusivity for sure. But you see at SAP and everything that we do in terms of, is to be able to support employees to bring their best self to work.
Yeah, I mean, as I listen to both of you, some of the takeaways in this conversation is, and hopefully our audience can get a semblance of that as well, is that at the end of the day, when you look at organizations that end up becoming thought leaders, right? And clearly you admittedly stated that you're figuring things out, but you're ahead of the curve, is that you can pick up some of these tenets that you spoke about, specifically in the context of technology and innovation and the types of experiments you folks have run. So here's a question, right? And I don't know if you have an answer to this, but I'd love to hear the way you're thinking about this. So I picked up that you have 20-odd labs across the globe in 17 countries, right? Walk me through pre-pandemic, because the staff is centered to those locations across the globe. I guess it's fair to state that each of those locations, vis-a-vis some of the other locations, has a homogeneous flavor, right? Whereas post-pandemic, is heterogeneity a thing where the space doesn't matter anymore? And does one lead to innovation and one disrupts innovation?
I feel that space still matters and will. I want to believe that because it ties to what we said earlier about culture. I feel that people want to feel Yes, you can work in a distributed network, but you, at the end of the day, want to feel part of something bigger, right? This purpose, being purpose driven. And so that can be at the larger scale of being purpose driven, being part of SAP and what SAP stands for, in addition to what you're building in your own team. But the location is something that is very much part of that equation. That is why our office exists, is to bring people, the unity, bringing people together across. The job can get done if you just focus on your own team, right? And if you just work from home, we have so many people, even in this office here, whose leaders are outside of Montreal, right? And so they never have to come into an office to get the job done necessarily, because their teams are not physically here. But they still do, because they're tied to a bigger purpose, which is the location, right? The identity of an SAP Labs Vancouver, Waterloo, Montreal, for example. And that stands for quite a bit, because you want to feel part of something larger.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'll speak to it from a facilities perspective. The other thing we've done in Montreal, we have neighborhoods. So everything, the office is broken up into, I don't even want to use the word broken up to, divide is a bad word too. We have 16 neighborhoods in the office. The office is like going out from your personal life, right? It's almost like, yeah, tonight I'm going to stay in and watch a movie or read a book. That's like working from home. Or no, I feel like going out tonight, and this is where I want to go, or this is what I want to do. The office almost has that flavor, where we have our neighborhoods dedicated to certain teams. Because let's face it, Montreal has an employee base of 1,000 people. They don't all know each other. There's people probably in Montreal that have never met. Even last week for me, I'm visiting there. I don't know who's who. I know some people. So the neighborhood basically accomplished that. And in unison with the app we developed, is you have something called what we called My Circle, which is whether it's your teammates on your team or people you hang out with. So you in your circle you put in, Cindy, Tom, and Jay are in the same circle, and then you can look at it and say, yeah, I'm coming in on Thursday. Why don't we get together? Why don't we sit in this neighborhood? So that it's another incentive to come into the office, because ultimately, look, my job is I want people to come to the office. Otherwise, I'm in big trouble. I'm going to have a job. But I want to make the job, or I want to make the office like super cool. Number one, I'll use the word cool, right? I want the office to be cool, because Cindy mentioned it earlier. I mean, we're also out there looking. We're recruiting, we're hiring. We want the next generation. They don't want to come into some stuffy office with a bunch of people in suits, right? That's passe. They want something really cool, whether it feels like you're going to Starbucks or some really great cafe. I mean, that's what the office has become for us.
Yeah, and similarly, I feel so passionate about this. We've heard it in the listening exercises. There's been such a lens on future of work, and such a lens on now I can work from home, and flex is an expectation, and certainly something that is an advantage if you're recruiting, to Tom's point earlier. But at the same time, we can't leave anybody behind. At the same time, there are many employees that are saying, I want to come back Monday to Friday, and I want to be in an office. I'm tired of Amazon, and the dog, and my kids, and I need a place to come to, and I want that separation. And we can't forget those employees. So we've built our spaces to be able to make sure that we're open for everybody, depending on what they need in an office. But we can't forget those that do want to come back to a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and have that kind of space to accommodate them.
Yeah, spot on. Just switching topics a bit, right? And this is a common misconception, mostly among younger startup founders, right? And the misconception is that, hey, big corporates don't innovate. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about, and having been in both places, I know for a fact that big corporates absolutely do innovate, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on the startup culture, especially now, driven by the energy levels from the gig economy, is all about hack away, get product market fit, failed, pivot, go back, pivot, till you get it right? Is that a culture that is nurtured / fostered in an environment like Labs in general, And I'd love to hear your thoughts as far as SAP Labs.
Yeah, sure. Fail and fail fast. Absolutely. I mean, look, we have a lot to learn from startups, but that entrepreneurial mindset, that be agile, iterate, listen to the customer, try, and then keep going. Absolutely, that's absolutely part of who SAP is, and certainly something that's been part of our mantra for quite some time right now. And so my answer would be, the short answer is yes. We have to be innovating. I mean, this is why you see us be able to, in this call, we're talking a lot about innovation in space, but to be able to innovate and stay leading edge requires us to be, really creating this mindset with all of our employees that we have to be able to think differently and constantly reinvent. Our customers are counting on us to do that. And as I said earlier, and that has to be pervasive through the organization. So it's not just development that owns the solutions to innovate.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, I agree.
And my job is to give them space that fosters that innovation, right? It's no different than, when you're working from home, you probably have that, or, let's take something like reading a book. You probably have a comfortable, that your favorite room, which really lets you read, versus if you sat in the garage or something, maybe you don't get that. So my job is to provide the space to let them innovate.
That's an interesting point. I just want to add, one of our acquisitions many years ago, I was speaking with some of the leaders and I was explaining that SAP has space for innovation. We have maker spaces, we have design thinking spaces. And there was this moment of pause of, you have space for innovation? Like you need space to do that, right? And so this marriage of course, right? You're innovating constantly. You're always thinking about how you can do things differently, solve a problem differently. But you also at SAP have wonderful resources and space and budgets to be able to do things, at scale that is quite impressive.
Absolutely. And on that topic, right, you raised a good point, Tom. In terms of, is space now, or in your case, this inventive ingeniousness about space, a pitch to get talent in? I mean, we're all in the middle of this the big resignation, as they call it, right? What are some of the instruments that both of you look at to position SAP, specifically the labs, to hire the best talent?
Coffee. We have state-of-the-art coffee machines. We buy great beans. You'd be shocked at how important that is. We leave nothing for them not to have, right? Like we're joking about it, but it is important. We put this fascinating, it's a bevy machine in Montreal, which is a flavored soda water machine. I think Cindy and I were hooked on it last week. It's things like that though. We have a games room with a pool table and foosball and ping pong and a Game Boy or whatever else. Obviously not a gamer, so we give them all those instruments so that maybe they're coming into work for a few hours, but they may want to take breaks. We don't want them to leave. Because they want to go home and game. Like, hey, yeah, game here, and then maybe you can work for another hour. So we're trying to give them everything at the office. So I think that the challenge now is getting them back because they've been away for so long. And listen, it's a big problem, right? As you get used to, we were joking about it last week, you've gotten used to waking up, in your pajamas and, plopping yourself in front of your computer. And if you look outside and it's raining or it's like a snowy day in December, that's going to be a tough draw now. So you need to find the way to draw them back. We'll call it sort of post-COVID. So you need to give them the incentives to come back in where it's a better experience than staying at home.
Got it. Cindy, do you have insights into what will it take, you think, to hire the best? Other than coffee?
Coffee is really important.
Sure.
I think, look, I do echo everything Tom said. I think it's an expectation, certainly, that there is flex. But equally, we hear, and you see that particularly as we're talking about Waterloo earlier, we have some of the best talent coming out of the local universities in Waterloo. 90% of the employees in Waterloo are all graduates of the University of Waterloo, right? And so you would hear that group talk very passionately about the fact that employees want the opportunity to meet each other, to be able to network. And there's certain things that one can do with Teams and Zoom, but there's nothing that replaces face-to-face. And so this is why we're very conscious of the fact that, Flex is going to be working. And so we have to do a lot of things that are hybrid. We're going to have to do things that are, virtual only or in person. And as things become safer to do so as we go through this pandemic, I think you'll see employees coming back to the office for very specific reasons. And one of those reasons is going to be to just exactly that, is to make new connections and to learn from each other. There's it's been proven, right, that the learning, I might sit in a course back in the day, an in-person course, and that transition to go get my coffee is where some of the best learning happens, right? It's bumping into Jay and Tom and saying, what did you think about that? And how I'm processing what I just learned is so important. And one of the pitfalls, I think, in the last 19 months is we're going back to back, Zoom to Zoom to Zoom. And so, but again, it's going to take, we're in this big social experiment in that as people come back, we saw it last week, so many colleagues said, oh, I forgot how nice this is. Yeah, the coffee's great, but I missed this what we're doing right now, this chatting at the coffee machine. That's so important, and important for our mental wellness as well. And we can't forget about that.
Absolutely. The more I talk to you, I feel like if you guys ever have an opening for somebody who does really nothing but wants to hang out and have conversation, sign me up.
Do you like coffee?
I love coffee.
We have tea too.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. So on a parting note, we're coming up on time. On a parting note, given what we've gone through over the last 18 months, either with your personal hat on or as the leaders that you both are in your realms, what would be a message that you want to give out to our listeners, tech founders, entrepreneurs, innovators, etc.?
Tom?
Whew. Come back. Yeah, it's, I mean, in all seriousness, I think I miss you. It's just like I look at, my day was already split pre-COVID. I would work from home 2 or 3 days. I traveled a bit, and then I'd go in a couple times a week. And I just miss everything, right? I miss getting on the train, and seeing people, walking to the office. So I think my biggest message would be let's forget, it's hard to forget the last 18 months, but I think come back, right? Let's re-engage. I mean, I think it's going to be the best of both worlds going forward. You'll have that where you can work from home, and it's maybe you want to work 12 to 8 today because you have something personal to do in the morning. The new world is flexible. Let's embrace flexibility, and let's embrace sort of kind of getting back to a pre-COVID world as much as we can.
Got it.
Yeah, I like that a lot, Tom. I think my answer would be, let's continue to focus on outcomes, right? If we've learned anything, is that when you focus on the outcomes, when you focus on the customer, and that doesn't, whether you're a startup or you're a big corporate like SAP, if we all diligently just try to delight the customer every day, that's where we're all going to win. And I think over the last 19 months, we've had to do that in ways that have been super innovative, and I like that. I think that we all know that in the times where there's scarcity, where there's this challenging opportunities, that's where really cool innovation happens, right? When you have to do something a different way. And I think that that's some of the beauty that's come out of this, is that we're going to come out of this with some new ideas, some new ways of working that we never thought were possible. And we've proven that, are a new way of working. And I think that's what, we've talked about the future of work for years. The future's now, and we're living it. And I think, I think it's super positive and super motivating to see all these lessons come to be and what we're going to take and what we're going to leave.
Fantastic. Yeah, I love it. I love the future is now. Cindy, thank you for that. Tom, I love the fact that you spoke eloquently about comeback. And I do believe that as a race, as a community, the social capital that we built has brought us this far. It's going to take us into the future, way beyond the pandemic. Thank you so much for the time that you spent. I wish we could converse for another 3 hours, but I guess
Our pleasure.
there
Yeah.
are bigger, better, faster things to do. But let's circle back at some point when things permit.
Absolutely.
So thank you again.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks for having us, Tom. This was lots of fun. We
Yes.
should go on tour together.
We
Let's
should.
do it.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Take care, folks.
Thank
All the
you.
best.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.